Hi, everybody. This unfortunately already our closing keynote for the first day of our global virtual AppSec 22. This one is Shira, Shamban, technical expert with a focus on cloud security. Currently, she is, as co-founder and CEO of Solvo, the first application-aware cloud security solution. But I don't want to go wrong because she said she will introduce herself. She's a professional in cybersecurity, has been military in an intelligence unit, strongly believes in empowering women. That's what you see on her t-shirt, as we showed to me. She is very represented in the community and technology world. She is volunteering, lecturing, monitoring. She's a very enthusiastic and devoted OWASP volunteer globally and in Israel. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Shira, Shamban, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Martin, for this introduction. And hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. Good evening to all of you in Europe. For me, this is good morning from San Francisco. I am at the RSA conference right now. I'm sure you had a very good day today at AppSecEU, and hopefully you will find some interesting topics today and in the rest of the conference as well. So let's get started. So as Martin mentioned, I'm Shira. On my day-to-day life, I'm CEO and co-founder of Solvo. Solvo is a platform that helps developers, DevOps, and security teams to keep a least privileged cloud application automatically. If you want to learn more about it, we can talk about it later. It is not the topic of our conversation today. But other than cloud security, I'm also the co-chair of OWASP Israel. But I have to say that my greatest achievement in life has nothing to do with cybersecurity. A few years back, I was working for a company that got acquired by a large corporate. And thanks to this acquisition, what happened was that the corporate made a change in their policy, and they became a dog-friendly company, thanks to my dog. So I definitely feel like this is my greatest achievement in life yet, that made a difference for thousands of employees worldwide. But now you know everything important to know about myself, so we can get started and talk more about business and about cloud security. OWASP Top 10. I think most of you are familiar with this project. But if not, I will just say that this is a community project that started many years ago, actually almost 20 years ago, where the community and the security experts point out at the most common or the most popular risks and security issues that we're seeing in applications, in web applications, because we want to raise the awareness and help developers and everyone else in the process to adapt a smarter and more secure way to deliver those applications, so that it's for us, for the end user, to feel more secured about it. Now, in 20 years, the world has changed. 20 years since OWASP was established. The applications that we create changed. The technologies that we're using changed. So obviously, the top 10 risks that appear in those in the document that is being published every few years also update and change over time. For me as a cloud entrepreneur, I was curious to take a closer look at the impact that the cloud made to the application security landscape. I want to remind you that when the cloud burst into our lives, was kind of a data center alternative. It wasn't supposed to be what it actually became, or I don't know if it wasn't supposed to be, but we didn't dream the cloud would become what it is today. And I will show you my thesis around it, but I think that there is a very thin line today between application security and infrastructure security. They actually go very well together. So in this talk, we're going to go back in time, 15 years back actually, to look at OWASP Top 10 and how it changed from 2007. I will be starting from the top 10 of 2007 until today. The last OWASP Top 10 was released in 2001. So this is a 15-year perspective. Later, I will share with you my predictions or my assumptions. They are all mine, not an OWASP official opinion about the future of OWASP Top 10. So one other important thing I have to say before we move forward. I'm going to share here the top 10 from 2007 until today. I did some digging into the OWASP documentation that is available to everyone online. And occasionally I found some inconsistencies in the order of appearance of the risks. So during this talk, I will not be referring to the ranking of the risks. So don't look at the order of appearance. If something appears on the top, that doesn't mean it was #1 that year. Let's just focus on the risks themselves that appeared in every year that we will be talking about. We're not going to talk about each risk specifically. I just want to look at the overall trend. In 2007, we had some newcomers, some new risks that showed up this year. I will be highlighting in green the new risks that came in this year. So CSRF, insecure communication, and malicious file extension were new at 2007. It's interesting to see how those things are still relevant today. Now, in general, for the sake of our conversation today, I will be grouping the risks into two categories. I did this dividing. It is not an OWASP terminology. I look at two groups today. One is the user and application interaction category, and the other is backend and infrastructure related risks. The user application group is looking at the interactions between the user and the malicious user and the application. So that could mean code injection, that could mean URL manipulation, and these kind of things. So in 2007, we saw 4 risks that belong to the group of the user application interaction. I will be highlighting that in yellow throughout the entire talk. So green for new risk, yellow for the user and application risk. So in the backend and in the backend group of vulnerabilities, of risks, we have the encryption, we have the authentication, and we have the network. We will see how these evolve over time, but this is 2007, and this is where we are starting. Now, the next thing I want to do after we talk about the vulnerabilities is what happened in the cloud world from the day of this document, the OWASP document was released until the next one was released. What happened in the cloud world? So really important stuff to talk about between 2006 to 2010 is first of all, you know, an important reminder, OWASP was here before the cloud. OWASP started early 2000 and AWS was born in 2006. A year later, our good friend S3 buckets came to the world, still very popular to this day. And it's pretty amazing to think about how popular it is and how we can't create any application without using it. In 2008, Google released the Google App Engine that later became what we are familiar with as GCP. So this is when these guys came to the world. Moving forward in our journey in time to 2010, 2 new risks made a first appearance that year: the security misconfiguration and the unvalidated, redirected, and forwards. By the way, according to the 2010 documentation, misconfiguration was also we refer to misconfiguration as also unpatched packages, exposed admin pages, and server configuration. So today, when we talk about misconfiguration, very often we relate to things like leaky S3 buckets. we saw S3 buckets only 2007. So when in the OWASP documentation, we talked about misconfiguration, we still related to more traditional and classic misconfigurations and not to the cloud misconfigurations as we know them today. Another fun fact is that security misconfiguration was a part of OWASP Top 10 of 2004. It had a little, the name was slightly different, Insecure Configuration Management. It was dropped out in 2007 because it wasn't considered to be a software issue. However, from the organizational risk perspective, it was clearly a part of the top 10, and this is why the team that built that document decided to put it back. So let's get back to my classification of risks. And in the user app domain, the risks that we have, now we have 4 of those. The previous year we had 4, now we have 5. In my world, again, in my definition, these risks have to do with the interaction between a user and things that, between the user and the application, a malicious user as well. So we're talking about things like getting access to unused pages, unpatched flaws, unprotected files and directories, if they're unauthorized to do so. And in the backend group, we are still mostly talking about encryption and network, so no massive changes over there yet. But let's move forward. What happened during this time in the world of cloud? In 2009, the cloud infrastructure is becoming more dominant. It is the go-to for startups and for enterprises that are creating new applications. Some of the enterprises are still in their on-prem and legacy technologies. But just wrap your head around it. In 2009, the cloud market size was $58 billion. Recently, in 2001, it was over $300 billion. Microsoft were a little late. In 2010, they introduced us to Microsoft Azure. As you guys and girls probably know, Azure today is the second most popular cloud vendor. So they beat Google in the race. We're getting closer to nowadays. We're now talking about the OWASP Top 10 of 2013. This year, we only had one new entry, maybe not exactly a new entry, more of a merge between insecure cryptographic storage and insufficient transport layer. They both became together sensitive data exposure. So not a lot of news in OWASP this year, but on the other hand, we had some very interesting things in that period of time in the world of cloud. In 2013, a company named .cloud released Docker as an open source tool aimed at simplifying the usage of Linux containers and making them accessible for everyone. If you're not familiar with .cloud, this is because today we just know it as Docker. So think about it. This is 2013. That's almost 10 years ago. It feels like only today we are really getting the hang of it and how to use this technology well and securely. 2014, Google launches Kubernetes as an open source container orchestration system to automate application deployment and scaling and management. So again, these are things that are now very, very, very popular, but back then, that was just the early beginning. 2013, we were also introduced to AWS Lambda, the serverless. So no doubt that this period of 2013-14 was very, very interesting in the world of cloud. And I think that at this point, we're also seeing a tipping point in the top 10 risks at OWASP. We will start seeing less user application kind of risks. It's not that they don't exist, but we're seeing more risks in the world of backend and in the world of infrastructure, and how infrastructure is becoming more relevant to our world of risk management and the popularity of those risks. We're in 2017. We are almost now. So we're almost over with our journey in time. OWASP Top 10 brought to us 5 new risks. One of them was emerge. Broken access control was insecure direct object reference and missing function level access control. So these two became one risk. Insufficient logging and monitoring, in my opinion, is a risk that definitely has a lot to do with cloud. The place where we became dependent on third parties to provide us with services that we must keep track on and make sure we are on top of every event and every incident, and we need to make sure which data went where and how come this event happened this way and not another, made us desperately need logs coming from other products or other services that we're using. Logging was also important in on-prem days, don't get me wrong, but this time we need them even more because so many things happen that we might not even be aware of. So I think that logging became an issue because of the popularity of open source code, multiple security operation products, just the multiple products all over the place, not to mention using multi-cloud and even hybrid cloud, and of course, more open source and different frameworks that we're using. According to my classification, another thing that we see, this year, we only had 2 user application risks. The other ones, the backend kind of risks, are exploitable, or Martin corrected me that we don't look at them as vulnerabilities, but at risks. But they're exploitable, of course, but from other levels of the application. They are not really in the user interface, at least in my classification, the way I see it. So we're moving away from the user application interface, going deeper into the application, the backend of the application, the third parties and the different services that we're using in order to make this application functional for us. So this is where I'm taking this now. So the backend is related to the vulnerabilities that now have to do with data, with access to data and different resources, and with authentication. And as we mentioned before, the logging. So this is getting interesting. We're leaving the area of the users and getting closer to the backend of the application, closer to the technology. At this point, when I was looking into the history of the modern history of the cloud, it was getting harder for me to identify groundbreaking events for the cloud domain. I think it's because it became such a mainstream and such a popular technology and natural technology to use in our life that maybe we take things as granted. But when I wanted to look badly for, more groundbreaking events, it was getting harder. Now we made it to the OWASP Top 10 of 2021. That's the latest release of OWASP Top 10. This year we had 3 new entries or 3 new risks. One of them was a renaming and expanding of the existing definition. It's interesting to see that in 2007, client-signed request forgery was a new entry. And in 2001, the server-side request forgery was a new entry. So you see where I'm taking this, right? We're moving away from the user, closer to the backend. Again, if we take a look at my classification of the risks, we will see that we grew further apart from the user. Basically, all we have left in the user application group is the injection. The other risks we have to do with the code of the application, the components the application is using, and basically this is a area I like to call it plumbing. Plumbing means that we connect different components together that we didn't build, making sure that all the different parts work well together. They enable a smooth flow of data and the functionality of the application, even though we didn't build each part specifically by ourselves. This time it includes access control, authentication and encryption. And this is why at the last version of the OWASP Top 10, we only have one user application related risk. Again, this is my take on it and the take on how the cloud made us move apart from the user interaction and closer to the infrastructure and backend. So this is, again, in my opinion, the biggest change that the cloud infrastructure brought to application security. The fact that the infrastructure is an integral part of the application, and we can't do application security without taking a very close look at the infrastructure, the cloud infrastructure, and to make sure we use it correctly, it is well configured, it doesn't expose our data, and not our data, not other people's data, not data of the application, and only the necessary entities. An entity can be a user or it can be another cloud component or an external cloud account. Only the necessary entities get the necessary access that they need. In your cloud application, on average, you have dozens of third parties and other SaaS products that are connected to your application, and you want to make sure that they only have access to the specific data and resources that they need. It's really easy, right? I know you can do it. So we went over the OWASP Top 10 from 2007 until 2021. But what does it mean for us? To sum up going back in time, this part of our journey, there are a few things I want to share with you. We saw that from focusing on the code of the application and the user application interface, the OWASP Top 10 is showing more risks that have to do with behind the scenes. So we no longer, it's not that we no longer manipulate URLs to get access to the hidden data, but we can find it in a misconfigured S3 bucket. So today we just have more ways to do some nasty stuff. We no longer need to exploit broken authentication. We can see that you assign an admin role to an internet-facing EC2 machine, so we can take over that. These kind of risks existed in the past, but they certainly exist today, but they just made some adaptations into the cloud world. In the past, there used to be a part of the IT team to make sure that the servers are not exposed to the internet. So the developers wrote the code, handed it over. Security was a silo, and we didn't have to do anything about it. But today, it's a part of the CI/CD process, where we actually have developers and DevOps and security team involved in the process. So it's a flow, no more silos, and everyone has to work together. So all of us need to make sure that it's a joint effort to secure our application and our data, no longer separate teams, but now everyone is actually working together on this. In the 2017 report, the writers created a very nice infographic of the previous risks in previous reports. So I took the liberty to create an updated version of this chart. Please feel free to take a screenshot if you want to get a kind of a overview of how the OWASP top 10 changed in the last 15 years. I will also ask Martin later if we can publish this as some kind of a white paper or put it in the OWASP website for everyone to use. So feel free to dig into this and see for yourself how different risks went out of the OWASP top 10. That doesn't mean these risks don't exist anymore, but you have to prioritize, right? So theoretically, we could have had OWASP top 100. But when we had to choose the top 10, these are the ones that made the cut. And it's really interesting to see how they change and adapt over time based on the new technologies that we see getting into our lives. So I promised you I will talk about my predictions, which again are my own. I don't think I have a lot of news here. I didn't come up with risks that you're unfamiliar with, but I tried to maybe look at what I'm seeing, the events and the incident and the breaches that I'm seeing today, and kind of guess where is it going to hit us, and what, in my opinion, makes sense to see in the future OWASP top 10. So in a way, we finished going back in time, and now we're going forward in time. And the bottom line, in my opinion, is that there isn't a lot of news. We previously didn't see any specific API risk in the OWASP top 10 in the previous reports. Even though, please remember that there is a dedicated project at OWASP for API security. I think that API risks and vulnerabilities are going to grow bigger and bigger on us. And other than that, I think we keep on seeing the same things, generally speaking, over and over again. Same mistakes, guys. Leaving credentials in text files, putting it in Dropbox, not rotating keys, giving everyone admin access. These are all things we keep on seeing over and over again. We have to stop with this. Relying on code we didn't write. Remember the chaos we had a few months ago around Log4j? Remember that just a couple of months ago, Okta, the service that all of us are using, got hacked. And through that hack, their customers got hacked. So this is sadly a good example to using third parties. This is crazy, but this is the world that we live in. Misconfiguration and architecture, to me, they mean that we just have to plan ahead and threat model. And we also have dedicated OWASP resources on that that you can feel free to use. Now, where are we going with this? You're probably wondering, what does this mean to you, and what can you do to improve your application security posture in the cloud? So here is my take on this. First of all, shifting left. We talk about it all the time, but still we find it very, very, very hard to implement. We'll be seeing more developers finding themselves touching the infrastructure, not because they want to replace the DevOps, but because they want to move faster. And if we want them to move faster and to deliver faster, we need to enable them with a secured way to do it. So we will need to implement automated DevSecOps and infrastructure security tools to make their life easier and to make our life, the security people life, less stressful. I mentioned the term plumbing before. This is the terminology that I like to use in the case of talking about different services and components that we didn't write. We connect them together and call this an application. The more we use the cloud, the more we use managed services, the more we use SaaS solutions as a part of our application, this is more plumbing that we are doing. And we need to learn how is the data flowing exactly, where to filter it, how to identify a leakage, how to make sure that only the necessary access is granted. I think we'll be seeing a lot more plumbing issues, so to speak, in the future. So prepare yourselves and prepare your team for this mindset of becoming security plumbers. Last but not least, we're all using third parties all the time. At the end of the day, if Okta got hacked, so who are we? And through Okta, their customers. So actually, no one is immune to these kind of things. No one. I don't rely on my vendors, and I don't rely on my external products to keep me secured. This is our responsibility to make sure that our infrastructure, our backend, our data are all secured. We're not going to QA the other products. We are not going to pen test the other products while we go through an audit. I mean, unless you really want to, I don't think it is our job to pen test the other products. So always remember that you're responsible for your own application, and keep in mind that those third parties might and might not be secured. And the fact that they are compliant to something doesn't mean that they are secured and secured enough and securing the standards that you would like them or you would hope they are secured. Always prepare yourself for a potential breach or potential hack. And I think that this is not news to you. Security is like an onion. You have layers and layers and layers. You can never have 100%. So keep in mind that you should also know in which layer did you keep the data and what kind of layers did you put around it, and where are the third parties around those layers, and what kind of security layers are you putting around them to mitigate potential future risks. So at this, I would like to thank you today for joining me to a journey in time from OWASP Top 10 2007 until 2021. I will be taking some questions now, and if anyone wants to reach out to me later over LinkedIn, over Twitter, please feel free to do so.
Thank you so much, Shira. So I hope everybody liked. So we have some questions from the customers, from the attendees. The first one is, over the years, there are mobile top 10, the API top 10, the Docker top 10. Shouldn't this be consolidated? Or are there guidelines that tell what to follow for what, on how to avoid confusion or increase awareness?
I think that this is the challenge that any security practitioner is facing. I can tell you that I'm here at RSA right now. You walk at the expo, you have dozens of security companies telling you about the importance of the risk that they're going to mitigate and resolve for you. At the end of the day, you know your application and you know your crown jewels, and you need to work your way around it. OWASP has very good and very up-to-date resources. For example, if you go and take a look at the other OWASP projects, not only the top 10, but the API top 10, the serverless top 10, you will be seeing some commonality. There are some mistakes that repeat themselves, and we see them in every project, right? So authentication is something that we see everywhere. So if you decide, and I think that you should, tackle authentication and make sure you do it correctly, if you do it once, it covers other security aspects as well. So I wish there was one single source of truth for the top 10 things everyone should be doing in their application, but it really differs. You know, some applications are on-prem and some in the cloud, and some also have a mobile application, and some don't have any PII. So their risks are totally different. Their potential of damage is totally different. So I just think that you need to analyze your application, threat model your application, and then start obviously with the things that could cause the biggest damage, and can give you the quickest, or maybe not the quickest, but the biggest impact on your security, and start with that.
If I may add, so it's indeed, we have about risk in a context. Of course, in several contexts, you have the same risk. But I would like to point out, it's an OWASP project, it's the open CRE, the open common requirement enumeration. It's kind of linking the requirements where they come from by context. So it's not a one-on-one mapping, but the mapping, like we have the, for example, authentication. You can see where the requirements for authentication come from, by what standard or which version of what standard. I will put it at the answers as well. It's a nice one to add.
Great.
Okay, the next question was perhaps about the future, the prediction. Perhaps insecure software supply chain will be on the list in the future. What do you think?
I think that it might be so. I think that any third party that we use, software supply chain, but also, also cloud infrastructure, I look at it as a third party. It's not exactly software in the sense that we copy and paste from Stack Overflow and put it into our application. But if you think about using AWS Cognito, for example, the authentication service that AWS has for you, what's behind it? There is some code that someone else wrote. So I look at it in a way, just like you mentioned, the third-party software supply chain, I look at using a managed service the same way, because this is, at the end of the day, a piece of code someone else wrote. So I think there is definitely room to put in the future OWASP top 10 using any kind of third-party service as a part of your application. This is a supply chain issue. I might mention one very interesting incident that happened a few months back. Someone at AWS accidentally, I assume it was an accident anyway, made a change to the security policy for S3 bucket. For the support role, they accidentally added a permission to read items out of S3. So for some time, if you used the support role for S3, AWS employees were able to read items out of your S3 bucket. So this is, to me, it's a third-party big issue. And when we talk about mitigating the third-party risks, thinking about the roles that you have enabled in your account, and maybe not allowing the service support for AWS to be active all the time is an interesting layer in the onion. And you don't have to enable it all the time. You can enable it just when you need it.
I like the security onion methodology. We have to think about that. There's some maps about the security onion. I also, when to this point, is when you talk about supply chain, I was wondering when it came up, because I know that many years ago, Josh Corman of IAM Discovery talked about supply chain cleanliness, and he had a method alignment of the car industry where one brand has less suppliers, but more external part. The other one has less external part, but more different suppliers. So the one goes for quality, the other one, the pricing, and then you see differences. So you have to have what do I import? And that's for our OWASP top 10, 2017, as you showed it, they had a using components of known vulnerabilities. And now it's the, let me see, it's the A6. It's vulnerable, outdated components. So definitely supply chain and this external components, it's more on the radar now, definitely for attackers. With open source, right? Everybody is allowed to contribute, and we all did it for the best, and now people will use it for the worst, definitely. Another question we have is the current release cycle of the OWASP 10, 3 to 4 years, enough for the future? What do you think?
It's a great question. I think that in theory, we could have updated it maybe every year or two, but would you run a very thorough assessment every year or two? I think that organizations don't do it that frequently. So at the end of the day, the OWASP top 10 is kind of a mirror to what we are seeing. Maybe 3 to 4 years is too long and we can shorten it, but I don't think that every year is necessary in the sense that, are we really going to take action based on a new OWASP top 10 every year? I'm not sure about it. But Martin, what do you think?
Yeah, I think we should take action. I'm always worrying about people demanding, like, hey, we always have 10 and now it's shaking all up our application security, posture, whatever. It's an awareness document. People forget it's not a complete list, it's an awareness document. And if you base your security posture on also 10, it's like you trust one tool for your security validation, right? Or your insecurity validation, how you want to call it. I'm always scared about people calling that because it's an awareness document. Use it. It's not a truth. It's not a complete set of requirements. But you know, so yeah, that's my. It's like always, I cringe in my teeth when I hear people like I think that say something about the maturity of the most companies. Another good question I heard is like, what do you think about a single biggest concern for organizations running in the cloud?
So of course, it's a difficult question. I can say my opinion about it. So we talked a little bit before about the plumbing and connecting different components. Very often in our cloud application, we not only connect components from the AWS marketplace, the different services that are available there, but we even connect external services, external vendors, external SaaS products, external AWS account. And we do this connectivity in the cloud using roles and policies, and not policy like I don't allow to connect to the internet, but a role and a policy is a part of IAM, Identity and Access Management. And I think that today, the really nasty AWS or cloud native hacks, but also the really good security mechanism to fight it is identity and access management. And this mechanism exists in AWS, in Azure, in GCP. Everyone should make sure that their permissions don't have too many holes in them, or don't have any holes in them if possible. I think that the biggest failures that are cloud native, not I forgot my credentials in my code in GitHub, but the cloud native incidents happen because we have enabled too much access to our crown jewel and resources. The example that I gave before about giving the EC2 machine admin permissions, I know someone in their company, I'm not going to say who, that for all of their Lambda functions, they use the same role. Each Lambda is doing something different. If you use the same role for all the Lambdas, I can take one of them, exploit it, create myself as the attacker with admin permissions. You will never know about it. So the cloud gave us this great power of creating an identity for every cloud component. We are using it the wrong way. So theoretically speaking, I can take one component in your cloud application and make it assume a role that can assume an admin role, and I can take over the entire account. People are unaware of this, and it's very, very, very simple to fix and to prevent. So I think that this is the single point of failure, but also the place that would give you the best security value for your time.
I think it's a perfect loop back to our opening keynote about the insider threats. And because what Lisa said back then, she sees companies, they fire somebody or someone will be laid off for whatever reason. And they said, oh, everything is good because we disabled the account, or the account will be, password will be reset anyway after several weeks. And they forget they have the non-profit, the non-personal, the service accounts externally. Like, oh, we have the shared account on this external service. They haven't thought about it. It's an interesting one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me see. I have seen many companies that do a lift and shift, so they're taking applications as is and do it to the cloud, because otherwise it costs a lot of money, right? What do you think about that?
It's funny. A while ago, I was talking to someone from one of the big cloud vendors, and they shared the statistics I was not unaware of. They told me that about 70% of the compute power today is still on-prem, not in the cloud. I thought it would be the other way around. I thought most is in the cloud and a little bit is still on-prem. So I think that, first of all, lift and shift is still a big challenge. I thought that, I mean, I was under the conception that now the challenge is cloud native. Lift and shift is still a problem. It's a big problem. And yes, there is a challenge, because if you lift and shift the architecture and the technology from the on-prem and just make it run in the cloud, you are not enjoying the benefit of the cloud. And I'm not even talking about security. Even the cost is not optimized if you just lift and shift. I know that sometimes you have no choice and you have to start it this way and re-architecture and rewrite the application later on. Yes, it happens. I think that when thinking about lifting and shifting and migrating to the cloud, always remember, there is no place for you to connect your firewall anymore. It works differently. And you have to, if you don't have the knowledge in-house, you need to bring in the consultant that will give you, again, the things that will quickly give you the value of just, you know, making sure that what you have here, that you just lifted and shifted, is secured. I think that the cloud vendors can give some help in that extent. It's difficult. Consider rewriting the application if it makes sense in your organization. I think that sometimes it's not as difficult as you think. You put some things in a container, put your data in a cloud database, and things are going to work smoothly from now on. Just remember that if you lifted and shifted some things you had in the on-prem, like code and packages that you had over there, sometimes people migrate COBOL applications to the cloud. It doesn't always make sense. So think carefully before you do it.
Yeah. I think that's also a good question, is when you look at the clicks and shifts, so is there, what is the overlapping of the application security and cloud security?
The overlapping, look, the code is code, right? If your code is vulnerable, it is going to be vulnerable in the container, in the cloud, or in the basement in your office. And OWASP is still about applications, right? So the code that you write or the code that you copy and paste, you need to make sure it's not vulnerable, and that you understand the risks that you put inside.
I remember that there was a company that tried to have this hardened environment, wherever how bad your code is, you can deploy it and the environment will take care, it's more secure. And unfortunately, it didn't work out. I would have loved to see that working, but it was kind of awkward. Anyhow, there's one more question. It's like, on the principle of least, oh, sorry, on the principle of least privileges, on the plumbing, which strategies do you think work best in a dynamic environment? For example, a principle of least privileges in a secure groups for Kubernetes?
Okay, so least privileges is a very important principle if you're building a cloud native application. The cloud vendors came up with it as a part of the shared responsibility model. They tell you, hey, we are responsible for bare metal, you're responsible for everything else, and you make sure that permissions are always reduced. So I think there are some even open source tools to help you try and look where you can reduce security permissions. For example, Netflix released some open source tools that can help you see which permissions are being used and which ones are not. And statistically, you might be able to reduce them. And it makes sense if you want to make your application least privilege or lister, to take a look at one of these open source tools. I can look for I have a list of open source tools that I had good experience with, so I can publish it later on Twitter, so you can take a look and see if either one helps you.
I think that's a very good answer. Shira, so much. Thank you for the nice talk and Q&A, long Q&A. Sorry for that. Thanks everybody for listening the whole day. I hope you had learned. So for the morning, the very nice opening session from Lisa 14. Now we have at Shira, Shamban for the closing session. Tomorrow morning, I'm again here to open the conference with a keynote from Astrid Osenberg. It's 9 a.m. in Ireland, UK time, and 10 a.m. Central European time. Shira, thank you again. Thanks for all you do in OWASP and your company. I wish you the best. Have fun in California. And I see you soon in person, I hope. Thank you. And thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.